So this morning, I'm going to share a true story that is important to Unitarian Universalists all over the world. This month, our worship theme is creativity. This story is about two people who, at a time when it was hard to believe it was a wonderful world, these two people used the creativity of their hearts and minds to envision a brand new, inclusive religious ritual that would celebrate the beauty that is within each person. It's the story of how, at a time of increasing tension and polarization, and during an uprising of hate throughout the country, people came together in love. It's the story of why and how the Unitarian Universalist Flower Communion was created. Now, I just said the word communion. That's a big, scary, religious word, right? How many people, that's like, oh, I'm getting nervous, I'm getting a little nervous. So, don't worry, communion, it's really just an ordinary, beautiful word that means sharing. So it's a story about sharing. Would you just say sharing? Sharing, right. So Norbert Čapek was born in 1870 in the country we now call the Czech Republic, but at the time it was called Bohemia. Norbert Čapek's family was too poor to send him to school, so they sent Norbert to live with his uncle Victor in Vienna, Austria. Next slide, I think. Yep. Norbert's uncle was a tailor, and Norbert worked as his assistant. That way, he was able to earn enough money to pay and go to school. Now, Norbert liked to learn. In school, he studied science, psychology, and philosophy, and he asked many questions about religion. Too many questions. Questions that challenged the faith in which he had been raised. Norbert asked, why does one person get to be in charge of the whole church and speak as the voice of God? And if there is a God, why do we need someone to talk to God for us? Why can't we just do it ourselves? And why are men only allowed to be ministers and priests? Why are there only men in charge? Men in charge are dangerous things. What about the women? And he asked, why can't I find a church that celebrates differences instead of trying to force people to be all the same? Well, as you could imagine, Norbert's uncle did not like that his nephew asked questions. He felt questions were dangerous. He said, if you want to make it in the world, then you better keep your mouth shut and your mind closed. Yeah, in some ways, the time and place in which Norbert lived wasn't all that different from what we see unfolding in our own country, including here in Fresno and in the Central Valley. Some people don't like it if we question those in power. Some people don't like it if we question why religion is used to negate some people and control others. Some don't like it if we choose to be spiritual in a way that is different from their own. Some feel threatened by differences. When Norbert grew to be an adult, he still hadn't figured out how to be spiritual in a way that felt authentic to him. He was struggling how to be true to himself, but also how to be true to the only religious tradition he knew, but one that now felt too small and confining for him. Then one day, while reading newspapers in a library, and libraries are good places, especially when books aren't being banned. One day, Norbert was in the library reading newspapers. He looked up and he noticed this woman also reading newspapers. Somehow, he knew he needed to meet her. He took a chance. He introduced himself. He said, "Hi, I'm Norbert Chopek." The woman responded, "Hi, Norbert. It's nice to meet you. I'm Maya Veronica Oktovec." As the two talked together in the library, Maya and Norbert realized they shared a similar interest in developing themselves intellectually. They wanted to grow and learn more and learn more. They were both on individual searches for truth and meaning. Norbert decided to take a risk and share his spiritual struggles with Maya, not knowing how she would respond. Would this be enough to send her screaming from the library and out of his life? But Maya listened, and she said, "Norbert, it isn't as complicated as you're making it. I think you're a Unitarian." Norbert responded, "What's a Unitarian?" Maya smiled, and then she said, "Unitarians respect each other, each person's own individual search for truth and meaning. They affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people while also believing that all life is interconnected and interdependent, which means that Unitarians also believe they are called to prioritize and protect the most vulnerable among us. They respect diversity, they respect difference, and see them as a spiritual strength. They aren't looking to force sameness on anyone, but rather teach that we need not think alike to love alike. Could we say that together? We need not think alike to love alike. Norbert's response was succinct. He said, "If that's what it means to be a Unitarian, sign me up." Norbert and Maya fell in love, and they got married. Soon after, they decided to serve more fully the Unitarian religion. Maya and Norbert decided to become Unitarian ministers. They went to seminary, and after several years, they were ordained. Maya and Norbert were officially the Reverend Maya and the Reverend Norbert. Now, at that time, over 100 years ago, there were very few Unitarian ministers. Maya was a trailblazer. She was a pioneer. She helped break a glass ceiling in a faith tradition, this one, that now 100 years later has more female ministers than male ministers. A faith tradition that also affirms trans and non-binary ministers. In 1921, in the city of Prague, in what is now called the Czech Republic, Maya and Norbert started a Unitarian church together. People from many religious backgrounds came to their new church. Many of them were frustrated and felt out of sync with the teachings of their former religions. They came to Maya and Norbert's congregation because they wanted to be part of a church that taught religious values that resonated with them. They wanted to be part of a spiritual community because they didn't want to face the complexities of life on their own. They wanted companions for the journey, companions who cared about shaping a more loving and compassionate world. This was 3 years after the end of World War I. The trauma, the death, and the destruction of that war was still all around them. In the aftermath of war, Maya and Norbert wanted to do something to bring people together and to remind them that even the most brutal and soul-crushing of times, there is still beauty in the earth and hope in the world. They wanted to create a ritual that would be open to everyone, no matter their religious background or spiritual beliefs. They wanted a ritual that would let them love inclusively. One morning, Maya looked outside their church window and noticed the flowers growing in the church garden. Maya said to Norbert, These flowers, they remind me of beauty and hope. Maybe our new ritual could be based on them. Maya continued in words summarized by Fred Small. In the ugliness of oppression, flowers celebrate the eternal hope of freedom. In the face of cruelty, they speak of courage and hope. Think of it, in the meadow, they speak of freedom, creating wild patterns and things that are so breathtaking, no gardener, even one of Fresno's best master gardeners, could match what nature creates. In their indescribable beauty, they remind us that we live always in the face of ineffable mystery. In the flowers' reappearance each year, flowers remind us that in spite of every hardship, life goes on. So, a ritual that uses flowers. So, they created the flower communion, the flower sharing. On that first Sunday, 100 years ago, they asked everyone to bring a flower with them to church. As they arrived, everybody placed their flowers in a large vase. Placing the flower in the vase represented that each person came into the church by their own free will. The children then carried the vase to the front of the church, and the congregation as a whole, not just the ministers, blessed the flowers together. After the service, as people prepared to leave, they went to the vase and each took a flower different from the one that they had brought when they arrived. So, what did this flower communion symbolize? First, no two flowers are the same. Together, the many different flowers form a beautiful bouquet. This bouquet would not be the same without each individual flower. So it is with us. Our church, it would not be the same without each and every one of us. No matter how different we may be, no matter how much we're struggling in our own lives, we are all beautiful in God's eyes, for we are all part of the great bouquet of creation. And as someone once told me, God don't make no junk. All in the end are beautiful, different, and one. Maya and Norbert introduced the flower communion 100 years ago on June 4th, 1923. And now the people in Maya and Norbert's Chopek's church liked this flower communion and the caring community that it represented. Their church in Prague became the largest Unitarian church in the world at that time, with over 3,000 members. That meant a lot of flowers for Flower Communion Sunday. But then, something happened that threatened this wonderful flower communion ritual. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis took control of Prague and Bohemia. Immediately, Maya and Norbert's church was labeled dangerous by the invading oppressors. The Nazis did not want a church like Norbert's. They did not want Unitarians. They did not want a flower communion that celebrated differences. They did not want Maya and Norbert Chopek preaching the loving Unitarian message that all people, no matter who they are born with inherent worth and dignity, and that all people are beautiful in God's eyes. Suddenly, Maya, Norbert, and the congregation found themselves in uncharted and uncertain times. They were frightened. They didn't know what was going to happen next. Would things just get worse and worse? Many Unitarians in the congregation were threatened or beaten and taken from their homes, put in prison. Some houses and businesses of Unitarians were robbed, shut down, or burned by the Nazis. Others worried that they would be the next to be disappeared, just like some of their neighbors who were Jewish. The Chopeks were regularly questioned by the Gestapo. They demanded that Maya and Norbert not speak negatively against the Nazis. So Norbert and Maya did not criticize Hitler during their sermons in public. They stayed silent. But in private, Maya, Norbert, and the members of the congregation formed a resistance team that met secretly at the church and helped Jews and other people escape from Prague. But finally, their conscience would not let them take this silence anymore. They knew that their Unitarian faith compelled them to speak out against the horror being perpetrated around them. In the spring of 1941, Norbert and Maya declared, "We can bear it no longer. We must speak the truth and not be cowards." That Sunday, during the sermon, Norbert directly challenged the Nazis by contradicting the hateful speech Adolf Hitler gave earlier in the week. Norbert excoriated Hitler for the lies and the cruel inhumanity Hitler had spewed with his words and his actions. Norbert contrasted that with his congregation's Unitarian religious values as revealed in the Flower Communion and in other teachings. 5 days later, the Gestapo came to their home and arrested Norbert. Because of his sermon, the Nazis said it was, quote, "too dangerous for Norbert Čapek to be allowed to live." Norbert was sent to Dachau, the concentration camp. On his papers were stamped these instructions: Čapek's return is unwanted. While at Dachau, Norbert introduced the prisoners to the Unitarian Flower Communion. Each prisoner brought what flowers they could find in the concentration camp to the special service, or sometimes it was just perhaps weeds. At the end of the service, the prisoners left with a flower or with a weed different from the one they brought. This symbolized their interconnectedness. Prisoners were strengthened by Norbert's words and inspired by the inclusive flower communion that was open to everyone, no matter what they believed. The prisoners liked that the simple ritual reminded them that there was still beauty, there was still goodness in the world. After the war, survivors testified that the Unitarian minister could not have been sent to a place where he was more needed. Norbert brought hope and resilience to the Jewish, Christian, Unitarian, Gypsy, lesbian, gay, and transgendered prisoners in Dachau. Norbert's ministry in the concentration camp ended when he was transported with other older prisoners to the section of the camp where barbaric medical experiments were being conducted on elderly patients. These were the last words Norbert wrote to Maya, his beloved wife and partner in ministry. Remember always, the goal of religion is to create strong, confident, active, creative, loving persons who are happy with themselves and with nature, humanity, and the spirit of life. When news of Norbert's death at Dachau reached the United States, the American Unitarian Association president, Frederick May Elliott, wrote, "Another name is added to the list of heroic Unitarian martyrs by whose death our freedom has been bought. Ours is now the responsibility to see to it that we stand fast in liberty." Those words remain true in our own uncertain and troubling times when our own country's democracy is under attack. Ours is now the responsibility to see to it that we stand fast in liberty. Back in Prague, it became too dangerous for Maya to remain in her city, and she fled. She came to the United States as an immigrant and refugee, asking this country to offer her sanctuary and safety. It was a different time than it is today, and she and the other migrants were welcomed at the border with open and understanding arms. Because Maya was allowed to enter this country, she was able to offer the unique gift that she was bringing with her from the congregation in Prague. Maya brought the flower communion to America. She first introduced it to the Unitarian Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but soon Maya began to travel and share the flower communion ritual all across the country. She shared it because she believed that the hardest times and the most dire moments are not strong enough to rob us of our love. It cannot rob us of our capacity to share love. Not even death can take from us the love that is exchanged between people. It's with us as long as we have love to offer. It's with us whenever we are open to receiving love from others. Dear ones, by offering what we can, by making room to receive the offerings of others, we carry within us the hope for the future. We carry within us the hope for the future. As we sometimes sing, from you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. May it be so. Que así sea, bendito sea, blessed be. Amen.